Erdogan was Putin's trump card against NATO, sort of like his inside man. But turns out the inside man was actually a double agent. Erdogan was never serious about blocking NATO expansion. He just put a price on it. He demanded political concessions and NATO had no option but to accept them. It was a shrewd strategic move, frankly not expected from someone like Erdogan. This sort of brinkmanship is Putin's territory. In 2008, he did that by attacking Georgia. In 2014, he did it again by annexing Crimea. Both these moves were strategic masterstrokes. They kept the West guessing. But this time, Putin may have overdone it. The whole point of this war was to stop NATO expansion, to push NATO westward. Instead, the opposite is happening. Putin is getting two more NATO countries in his backyard, Finland and Sweden. So politically, the war is turning out to be a setback for him. Militarily, maybe not yet. Reports say Russia is winning the battle for the Donbass. They have captured Severodonetsk. Their next target is Lysychansk. But you can't measure wars with territory. You measure wars with political success. And on that, Putin has failed. Perhaps he was better off trying diplomacy or focusing on the Donbass instead of Kiev. Reminds me of a famous Sun Tzu quote. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. Clearly, this was not the time to fight. By January and February, the West was already under a lot of pressure. Putin had amassed thousands of soldiers near Ukraine. The threat of war was enough to spook them. Perhaps that was the time to negotiate, to drive home his military advantage. Instead, 4 months later, he's nowhere near taking Kiev. Now compare that to Erdogan. He knew exactly when not to fight. By the end of 2021, Erdogan was in the dumps. His economy was collapsing. His allies were abandoning him. Erdogan was the most toxic leader on the world stage. What's worse, his people were turning. Turkey is set to hold elections in 2023, presidential elections. And Erdogan's party is not polling well. So what does he do? He uses his foreign policy to boost his position. It was a delicate game of diplomatic chess. You could split it into 3 moves. The opening move. Erdogan declared neutrality when the war broke out. He did not condemn Putin's invasion. Instead, he placed himself as a mediator. He spoke to both Putin and Zelensky. His foreign minister visited both Kiev and Moscow. Plus, he hosted the first major peace talks between the two sides. You may remember that meeting in Antalya. Both Ukraine and Russia sent their foreign ministers. Other countries, of course, also tried to mediate. Israel tried. French President Emmanuel Macron tried. But none of them had Vladimir Putin's trust. Erdogan, on the other hand, did. They worked together in Syria, in the Caucasus, in North Africa. So Putin was more comfortable with Erdogan. The result is this. He had leverage on both sides. Suddenly, the US president was reaching out to him. The same president who once talked about toppling Erdogan. He was reaching out to him. Same with Moscow. They said nothing when Turkish drones killed dozens of Russian soldiers or when they closed off the Bosporus. Erdogan made himself indispensable for both sides. So politically, he was back in the game. Move number 2 was to raise money. He had to revive Turkey's economy to win the elections. And for that, he turned to the Gulf. And frankly, it was a no-brainer. The Gulf states were flush with cash after the rising oil prices. It was the best time to capitalize, and Erdogan did just that. In February, he visited the UAE. In March, he hosted Israel's president. In April, he visited Saudi Arabia. And in June, he hosted the Saudi crown prince. That's a lot of banquets and bilaterals, but they worked. Turkey has been welcomed back into the Islamic community. The Khashoggi murder is long forgotten. The Arab Spring is long forgotten. Erdogan is back on the high table. So that's politics check, economy check. Now, he just needed one more. A domestic political boost. Enter Finland and Sweden. Both countries are home to a sizable Kurdish community. Around 100,000 Kurds live in Sweden alone. But in Turkey, they're viewed as separatists. A rallying point for Erdogan's nationalist voters. So what does the president do? He blocks NATO's Nordic expansion. He demands concessions on extraditing the Kurds. So back home, he's now the nationalist hero, the man who brought terrorists to justice. Like I said, it was a delicate game of chess, a mix of desperation, luck, and statecraft. Maybe he's done enough to win the re-election in 2023, maybe not. But here's what we can say in the meantime. Erdogan's victory would not have been possible without Western capitulation. Joe Biden promised to sanction Turkey. Instead, he's selling them F-16 jets. Finland and Sweden claim to be the happiest places in the world where you can find human rights in the tap water. But now they're extraditing Kurds. Yes, some of them may have committed crimes, but most of these Kurds were just fleeing persecution. They're activists and politicians. So Erdogan's grand strategic victory is a failure for the international community. They wanted to topple one warmongering autocrat, but in the process, they may be propping up another one. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.